August 1944, a quiet office in Granville, France. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the man who would one day become President of the United States, stared at the report on his desk with a mix of disbelief and frustration. The words were bold, almost defiant, penned by none other than Lieutenant General George S. Patton Jr. dated August 20th. The dispatch proclaimed that Patton's Third Army had single-handedly sealed the Falaise Pocket, annihilating the German Seventh Army and securing a monumental triumph for American forces. Eisenhower leaned back, his mind racing. He knew the truth, a truth Patton seemed determined to rewrite. Just moments before, reports confirmed that it was the Canadian and Polish troops who had surged from the north, enduring relentless opposition to clamp the trap shut. They had battled for days against elite German units, sacrificing everything to achieve what Patton now claimed as his own. This wasn't just a battlefield update, it was an attempt to hijack history itself. Eisenhower faced a dilemma that could fracture alliances at the war's critical juncture. How could the Supreme Allied Commander allow one of his top generals to overshadow the valor of entire nations? What if this lie took root, erasing the contributions of thousands who had given so much? The answer would reshape how we remember one of World War II's pivotal moments, and reveal the hidden battles fought not with tanks, but with truth and integrity. To grasp the weight of Eisenhower's decision, we must step back to the summer of 1944, a time when the tides of war in Europe were shifting dramatically. It had been just over 2 months since D-Day, the massive Allied invasion of Normandy, on June 6. That operation, codenamed Overlord, involved more than 156,000 troops landing on 5 beaches under heavy fire, marking the beginning of the end for Nazi occupation in Western Europe. American, British, Canadian, and other Allied forces had established a foothold, but the path forward was grueling. The Normandy countryside, with its dense bocage, ancient hedgerows that formed natural barriers, turned every advance into a painstaking struggle. Allied casualties mounted as they pushed inland, capturing key towns like Caen and St. Lo, but the Germans, under Field Marshal Gunther von Kluge, mounted fierce defenses. By late July, the Allies launched Operation Cobra, a breakthrough led by American forces that shattered German lines west of St. Lo. This opened the floodgates for Patton's Third Army, activated on August 1, to exploit the gap. Patton, known for his aggressive tactics and colorful personality, drove his troops eastward with remarkable speed, covering hundreds of miles in weeks. His army's mobility was bolstered by innovative logistics, including the Red Ball Express, a convoy system manned largely by African-American soldiers who delivered over 12,000 tons of supplies daily despite constant threats. Meanwhile, to the north, British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's 21st Army Group, including the 1st Canadian Army under Lieutenant General Harry Crerar, pressed southward. This set the stage for a classic pincer movement, Patton's forces swinging north from the south, and the Canadians pushing south from the north, aiming to encircle German Army Group B in what would become known as the Falaise Pocket. The pocket formed around the towns of Falaise and Argentan, trapping elements of the German 5th Panzer Army and 7th Army, over 100,000 troops, along with thousands of vehicles and heavy equipment. This encirclement represented the largest such operation on the Western Front since the war began, potentially shortening the conflict by months if successful. The strategic genius lay in its simplicity: 2 massive Allied arms closing like a vice, squeezing the enemy into submission. But success hinged on coordination, and national pride added layers of complexity. The boundary between American and Canadian sectors was drawn along the line from Argentan to Falaise, with Patton tasked to hold at Argentan while the Canadians closed from above. This decision, made by Montgomery and approved by Eisenhower, aimed to avoid friendly fire incidents in the chaotic fog of war. Enter the key figures whose ambitions and leadership styles would define this chapter. George S. Patton Jr., at 58, was already a legend. Nicknamed Old Blood and Guts by the press, he embodied American bravado with his polished helmet, riding crop, and pearl-handled revolvers. Patton's philosophy was relentless offense. He once said, "The object of war is not to die for your country, but to make the other bastard die for his." His Third Army's rapid advances boosted morale back home, where headlines celebrated him as the spearhead of liberation. Yet, Patton's ego often clashed with coalition realities. He viewed British commanders as overly cautious and had privately dismissed Canadian capabilities, seeing the war as a personal arena for glory. On the Canadian side, Lieutenant General Harry Crerar, 56, commanded the 1st Canadian Army, a milestone as it was the first time Canadians led at the Army level in the war. Previously, Canadian troops had served under British or American oversight, fostering a desire to prove their independence. Crerar, a meticulous planner with experience from World War I, felt the weight of national expectations. His army included not just Canadians but also British units and the Polish 1st Armored Division under Major General Stanislaw Maczek. Maczek, a 52-year-old exile whose homeland had been divided by Nazi and Soviet forces in 1939, led battle-hardened Poles eager to strike back. These men fought with a fervor born of loss, knowing victory might help reclaim Poland's freedom. Major General Guy Simonds, at 41 the youngest corps commander in the Commonwealth, led the 2 Canadian Corps. An innovative tactician, Simonds had pioneered techniques like artificial moonlight for night advances using searchlights. His Operation Tractable, launched on August 14, was designed to breach German defenses with overwhelming force. Over 1,000 tanks and armored vehicles, supported by massive air and artillery barges. Simonds drove his troops hard, understanding that speed was crucial to prevent German escapes. Overseeing it all was Dwight D. Eisenhower, 53, the Supreme Allied Commander. A master diplomat as much as a strategist, Eisenhower balanced egos, politics, and military necessities. Born in Texas and raised in Kansas, he lacked combat experience but excelled in organization, having coordinated the North African and Italian campaigns. His role demanded impartiality, as he later reflected, "I had to be an umpire as well as a commander." With the Falaise operation underway, Eisenhower monitored progress from his headquarters, aware that unity was as vital as firepower. As August progressed, the noose tightened. Patton's Third Army reached Argenton on August 13, fulfilling its objective with characteristic dash. Eager for more, Patton requested permission to push north toward Falaise, arguing his momentum could end the pocket swiftly. But Montgomery denied it, citing the risk of overlapping sectors and potential blue-on-blue incidents. Patton fumed, confiding to his diary that he was being restrained to allow the British glory. In reality, logistical strains plagued his advance. Fuel shortages from extended supply lines limited operations, and exposed flanks invited counterattacks. The decision was pragmatic, not political, but Patton's resentment simmered. Meanwhile, the Canadians faced the brunt of resistance. Launching Tractable at dawn on August 14, they employed a smokescreen from bombers to obscure advances, followed by a rolling barrage from 720 artillery pieces. Over 800 bombers softened targets, but tragedy struck when miscommunications led to bombs falling on Allied lines, causing hundreds of casualties. Despite this, Canadian divisions like the 2nd and 3rd Infantry, alongside the 4th Armored, pressed on. They traversed open terrain dotted with villages turned into strongpoints by German SS units, including the 12th SS Panzer Division, Hitlerjugend, young, indoctrinated fighters known for their zeal. The fighting intensified over the next days. On August 15, Canadian engineers bridged rivers under fire, enabling armor to advance. By August 16, Falaise fell after bitter street-by-street engagements, with the Black Watch, Royal Highland Regiment, of Canada playing a pivotal role. Yet, a 12-mile gap remained, through which Germans streamed eastward, abandoning gear but saving manpower. Estimates suggest 20,000 to 40,000 escaped in those critical hours, a testament to the operation's partial imperfection. The Poles, advancing on the right flank, captured key heights like Hill 159, providing vantage for artillery spotters. Casualty reports painted a stark picture. Canadians suffered over 4,000 losses in the first week alone, with Poles adding hundreds more. These numbers reflected the ferocity. German commanders like SS-Oberst Gruppenführer Paul Hauser ordered fanatical holds to buy time for withdrawals. Inter-Allied cooperation shone through, however. American air support complemented Canadian ground pushes, and shared intelligence mapped enemy movements. By August 19, the gap narrowed to 3 miles near Chambois. Polish forces under Maczek reached the village from the north, while Americans held positions south. At 7:20 p.m., A Polish patrol led by Captain Jerzy Wasowski met American troops from the 90th Infantry Division in Chambois Square. Hands shook amid the ruins, symbolizing the pocket's closure. Yet, sealing it on paper didn't end the ordeal. Desperate Germans launched breakouts, testing the thin Allied cordon. The Poles bore the immediate pressure, fortifying Hill 262, dubbed Maksuga for its mace-like shape. From this elevation, they directed fire on escaping columns below, disrupting thousands. Surrounded on three sides, Maxek's men repelled assaults from inside and outside the pocket, conserving ammo by scavenging from fallen comrades. Canadian reinforcements, including artillery from the First Army, bolstered them, firing over 250,000 shells in support. As the pocket compressed, the landscape transformed into a graveyard of machinery. Over 2,000 vehicles destroyed, including 300 tanks. Allied air forces, like the RAF's Typhoon squadrons, strafed columns, amplifying the encirclement's impact. By August 21, relief arrived for the Poles, solidifying the seal. Inside, 50,000 Germans surrendered, with 10,000 dead, the remnants of 15 divisions obliterated. Yet, amid this triumph, Patton's August 20 report arrived at Eisenhower's desk, asserting Third Army's sole credit. It downplayed Canadian efforts, ignoring Polish heroism on Hill 262 and the northern advance's toll. Eisenhower, reviewing maps and intel, recognized the distortion. National prestige was at stake. Canada sought validation as a military power, Poland fought for its future, and America risked alienating allies. The Supreme Commander weighed options. Silence might preserve harmony. Patton was a media darling, his exploits fueling home front support. But truth demanded action. Betraying the Canadians could erode coalition trust. Eisenhower resolved to confront Patton, ensuring history reflected reality. This decision, rooted in fairness, would echo through post-war alliances and remind us that victory belongs to all who earn it. As the dust settled over the shattered fields of Normandy in late August 1944, the true scale of the Allied victory at Falaise became undeniable. Over 50,000 German prisoners marched into captivity, their faces etched with exhaustion and defeat. Another 10,000 lay dead amid the wreckage of more than 3,000 vehicles, tanks with turrets blown skyward, trucks charred beyond recognition, and artillery pieces twisted into scrap. This was no ordinary battlefield, it was a killing ground on a scale rarely seen in the West. Allied pilots who flew over it later described roads so clogged with destroyed equipment that they looked like junkyards stretching for miles. Yet even in triumph, a shadow lingered. General Patton's report claiming primary credit for sealing the pocket had reached not just Eisenhower's desk, but also Canadian and British headquarters. Whispers of discontent spread through the ranks. Soldiers who had bled to close the gap from the North heard rumors that an American general was rewriting their story. Eisenhower knew he could not let this stand. The Supreme Commander chose truth over convenience, setting in motion events that would protect the historical record and strengthen the alliance at a moment when division could have been disastrous. Eisenhower's first step was to witness the battlefield himself. On August 23, just 2 days after the pocket's final closure, he toured the area known as the Corridor of Death, the narrow escape routes where escaping Germans had been caught under relentless air and artillery fire. What he saw profoundly affected him. The destruction was total, fields littered with the carcasses of thousands of horses, still harnessed to wagons because the Germans relied heavily on animal transport when fuel ran short. The summer heat amplified the stench of decay, forcing officers to cover their noses. Wrecked Panther and Tiger tanks, once symbols of German might, sat abandoned or smoldering. Eisenhower later wrote that the scene rivaled anything imagined in Dante's Inferno, describing how one could walk hundreds of yards stepping only on dead flesh, human and animal alike. This was the price paid to destroy Army Group B, and Eisenhower knew precisely which soldiers had extracted that price. Back at Supreme Headquarters, Eisenhower gathered reports from every sector. The numbers told a clear story. From August 8 through 23, the 1st Canadian Army suffered approximately 5,500 casualties while advancing against the most determined German resistance. The Polish 1st Armored Division alone lost over 1,400 men, nearly 35% of its strength, in the brutal defense of Hill 262 and the final pushes. In contrast, Third Army casualties in the Argentan sector totaled around 800. These figures weren't abstract, they represented young lives cut short, families forever changed. The Canadians had attacked across open ground into the teeth of SS Panzer divisions, clearing fortified villages house by house. The Poles had held a critical height while surrounded, buying precious hours for the encirclement to solidify. Patton's troops had performed brilliantly in reaching and holding Argentan, cutting off southern escape routes, but the hardest fighting, the advance that actually linked the pincers, fell to the northern forces. Canadian commanders reacted with restrained fury. General Crerar, upon learning of Patton's claims, wrote to Montgomery expressing deep concern. He emphasized that while he sought no undue glory, neither would he accept the erasure of his army's achievements. "We have written a proud page in Canadian military history," Crerar stated, "and we must ensure it is read correctly." The sentiment echoed down the chain. Soldiers in Canadian units, upon hearing snippets through the grapevine or Allied newspapers, felt a mix of pride in their accomplishment and anger at its potential theft. Many had friends buried in freshly dug graves across Normandy. To see their sacrifice attributed elsewhere stung deeply. The Polish perspective carried additional layers of tragedy. General Maxek's men had fought with extraordinary courage, knowing that even victory might not bring freedom to their occupied homeland. Poland's fate was already being decided in distant conferences between Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin. The Poles understood that their contributions might be forgotten in the post-war settlement. Yet they held Hill 262 against overwhelming odds, directing fire that shattered German breakout attempts and saved the entire operation. When news of Patton's report filtered through, it reinforced their quiet determination to simply do their duty, regardless of recognition. Within Third Army, reactions varied. Many of Patton's staff officers privately acknowledged the truth. They had access to the same intelligence summaries showing Canadian and Polish advances closing the gap. Some confided doubts in personal diaries, preserving honest accounts for posterity. But loyalty to their charismatic commander ran deep. Patton inspired fierce devotion. His aggressive style had turned stalled fronts into breakthroughs. Publicly contradicting him risked career repercussions, so most remained silent while fulfilling their duties impeccably. Montgomery, never shy about credit himself, nonetheless insisted on accuracy here. As commander of 21st Army Group, he oversaw the Canadian effort and submitted detailed reports to Eisenhower emphasizing their decisive role. Even Montgomery, often criticized for self-promotion, recognized that stealing glory from troops under his command would be unacceptable. By August 24, Eisenhower reached his decision. He summoned Patton to headquarters for a private meeting. No aides, no recordings, just two American generals facing a difficult truth. What transpired behind those closed doors became one of the war's pivotal moments of moral leadership. Eisenhower laid out the facts methodically. Battlefield visits, casualty reports, timelines from multiple sources. He praised Third Army's speed in reaching Argentan and holding the southern shoulder, achievements that prevented German reinforcement from that direction. But he drew a firm line. Closing the pocket from the north, against elite SS units across difficult terrain, was the work of Canadian and Polish forces. Their casualties proved it. Their advances sealed it. Patton's response, recorded in his diary that evening, revealed his frustration. He called the meeting a riot act reading and grumbled about politics overriding military reality. He still believed Third Army could have ended the pocket days earlier if permitted to advance beyond Argentan. Yet even Patton, beneath the bluster, recognized Eisenhower's authority and the coalition's fragility. He agreed to revise his reports.